Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going deep on something pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Something you literally rely on every single day.
Right.
Your immune system.
Yeah.
We'll be pulling from a second-year nursing lecture on immunology and HIV/AIDS for this one.
Sounds good.
So by the end, you'll know how this complex system works, how it can go wrong,
Right.
and what that means for you.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff.
Right.
People take it for granted until
Yeah.
it's not working the way it should.
Totally. So to kick things off, this lecture highlights three main functions of the immune system: defense, homeostasis, and surveillance.
Okay.
Defense, I get, but
Yeah,
what about homeostasis?
Yeah.
Surveillance.
Oh,
These sound a bit more,
complicated.
complex.
Think of your immune system as a really intricate security system.
Okay.
It's constantly scanning for threats and maintaining order within your body.
Mm.
So that's where those two come in. Homeostasis is making sure that the immune response is balanced.
Okay.
It doesn't overreact. It doesn't damage your own tissues.
Right.
And then surveillance.
Yeah.
Surveillance is constantly patrolling for anything suspicious,
Like a...
like damaged cells or foreign invaders.
Oh, so it's not just about fighting off like the obvious, like a cut or something. It's
Right.
about making sure...
Keeping the peace.
Keeping the peace.
At a cellular level.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So this is where those terms antigen and antibody come in, right?
Yes.
I remember those from bio.
For sure.
But it's always good to have a refresher.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen.
Antigens are like unique ID cards
Oh.
carried by invaders, like bacteria, viruses, even allergens.
Okay.
That triggers your immune system's alarm bells.
Right.
Okay. And then antibodies are those specialized proteins your body produces in response to that.
Mm.
And they act like guided missiles designed to target and neutralize specific antigens.
So each antibody is designed to fit a specific antigen.
Yeah, you got it.
That's cool.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
It's like a lock and key system.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So walk me through how the body would fight off a virus.
Okay, so it starts with macrophages,
Okay.
which are kind of like the first responders of your immune system.
Okay.
They engulf the virus, and then they display fragments of it on their surface.
Like presenting evidence
Yes.
to the rest of the immune system.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, like they're detectives gathering clues at a crime scene.
Love that.
Yeah.
So then what happens?
So then you have the T helper cells.
Okay.
These are like the strategists of your immune system.
Okay.
They recognize those viral fragments presented by the macrophages.
Okay.
And then they trigger that cascade of events to mobilize a targeted attack.
So like they sound the alarm.
Right.
Okay.
They release chemical messengers called cytokines, which act as alarm signals.
Okay. Cytokines are the alarm. Got it.
Yeah, and they call for reinforcements, and they direct other immune cells to the site of infection.
So what are the actual weapons?
So you have two main forces.
Okay.
Cytotoxic T cells,
Okay.
which are like the warriors.
Right.
They directly attack and destroy infected cells.
Okay.
And then you have the B cells,
Mm-hmm.
which produce massive amounts of those targeted antibodies
Right.
we were talking about,
Right.
which then mark the virus for destruction.
Wow. It's fascinating how all those different cells work together.
I know, right?
Like a well-coordinated team. It
Yeah.
really makes you realize how much is going on in there,
For sure.
keeping us healthy.
Yeah.
Now, the lecture also talks about what happens when the system is compromised, and they
Yeah.
use the term immunodeficiency.
Right.
What does that even mean?
So that basically means your immune fortress has weakened walls,
Gotcha.
making you more vulnerable to infections.
Right.
So you have primary immunodeficiency, which is usually genetic.
Mm.
But the lecture focuses more on the secondary immunodeficiency, which is acquired
Okay.
due to external factors.
So, like, things we might encounter in everyday life
Exactly.
that could actually weaken our immune system.
Yeah, you might be surprised.
Okay, like what?
Certain medications,
Okay.
like corticosteroids or chemotherapy, can suppress the immune response.
Right.
Also, radiation therapy,
Mhm.
even severe burns, can impact your immune system's ability to function properly.
Wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah,
So basically, those things leave us more susceptible to infections because our defenses are down.
exactly.
What are the real-world consequences of that?
Okay, so the lecture gives an example of leukopenia.
Leukopenia.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a condition where the body has a low white blood cell count.
Okay.
And white blood cells, remember,
Yeah.
are crucial for fighting infection.
Hmm.
So having too few can be really dangerous.
Leukopenia. I vaguely remember hearing that term before, but I don't really understand like what it means.
So imagine you're so vulnerable to infection
Okay.
that you need to be protected from the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
That's where reverse isolation comes in.
Reverse isolation. Instead of isolating someone who's contagious to protect others,
Right.
we do the opposite.
We isolate the patient to protect them from germs.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is.
So they're so vulnerable that even everyday germs could be life-threatening.
Exactly. That's how vital a functioning immune system is for us to survive.
Yeah.
And speaking of threats to the immune system, that brings us to HIV, a virus that has profoundly impacted the world.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork with how the immune system works.
Right.
And how it can be weakened.
Yep.
Now let's get into the specifics of HIV.
Let's do it.
What makes this virus so different,
right,
and why it's been so challenging to combat?
So HIV is fascinating. It's a complex virus.
Okay.
It's classified as a retrovirus.
Retrovirus.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of futuristic.
It does, right?
What does it even mean for a virus to be a retrovirus?
So it comes down to its genetic blueprint and how it replicates.
Mm-hmm.
Most viruses use DNA as their genetic material.
Okay.
But retroviruses like HIV, they use RNA.
Okay.
And here's the key. HIV carries a special enzyme called reverse transcriptase, which allows it to do something pretty remarkable.
Okay, I'm listening.
It can convert its RNA into DNA.
So it's like rewriting the rules of genetics.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's pretty wild.
It is.
Yeah.
And this is what makes HIV so insidious.
Okay.
Once it converts its RNA into DNA, it can then insert that DNA into a host cell's own DNA.
Wow.
Essentially hijacking the cell's machinery to make copies of itself.
So the virus becomes a permanent part of the infected cell's genetic makeup.
That's right.
That sounds like a real challenge for treatment.
It is.
Wow.
This integration into the host's DNA makes it really difficult to eliminate the virus completely. The lecture actually gives a visual aid called the HIV life cycle to help illustrate this.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So it shows how HIV replicates and spreads within the body.
Exactly.
I'm looking at it now, and yeah, it does look like a complex, multi-step process.
It is.
Are there points in this cycle where medications can intervene?
Yes, thankfully there are.
Okay.
Different classes of HIV medications target specific steps in this life cycle.
Gotcha.
For example, you have entry inhibitors.
Okay.
Those work by preventing the virus from even attaching to the host cell in the first place.
Okay.
You also have reverse transcriptase inhibitors, which block that step of converting the RNA to DNA.
Right.
And then there are protease inhibitors.
Okay.
Those interfere with the assembly of new viral particles.
So it's like a multi-pronged attack on the virus.
Exactly.
At different stages.
Yep.
This is really helpful for understanding how the medications work.
Yeah.
And it makes me realize developing these drugs must have required a really deep understanding of the HIV life cycle.
Absolutely. Understanding the virus's replication process is crucial for developing effective treatments.
Yeah.
But we've mentioned a few times now that HIV targets the immune system.
Right.
Can you remind us which cells are most affected by this?
Yeah, and why that's so significant.
Right. So HIV has a particular affinity for those T helper cells.
Okay.
Also known as CD4 cells.
Right.
Which we discussed earlier.
Right, the strategists.
Exactly, the coordinators of the immune response.
Right.
As HIV replicates, it systematically destroys these crucial CD4 cells.
Wow.
Progressively weakening the immune system.
So it's not just that HIV is present.
Right.
It's actively dismantling the body's ability to defend itself.
Exactly.
That explains why people with HIV are more susceptible to infections.
Exactly.
Wow.
And to give you a sense of the scale of destruction here,
okay,
studies estimate that during an HIV infection, approximately 1 billion CD4 cells are destroyed each day.
1 billion every day.
Every day.
That's a mind-blowing number.
It is.
Yeah, it really puts into perspective how much damage this virus can do.
If left untreated.
If left untreated, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's why monitoring the progression of HIV infection is so crucial.
Right.
One of the key ways doctors do this is by measuring the viral load.
A viral load, okay.
Which refers to the amount of HIV present in the bloodstream.
So higher viral load means a more severe infection.
Generally speaking, yes.
Right.
A high viral load indicates that the virus is actively replicating.
Right.
And likely causing more damage to the immune system.
Okay.
It's also a key factor in determining the risk of transmitting HIV to others.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So knowing your viral load is essential for managing your own health.
Exactly.
And for protecting others.
Right. Okay. We've talked a lot about how HIV works.
Yeah.
But how did we discover this virus in the first place?
Right. What's the history of HIV?
It has a complex history.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a tragic history.
Yeah.
It's a story that's intertwined with scientific discovery, social stigma, and the tireless work of researchers, healthcare professionals, and activists.
Right.
So let's delve into some of the key milestones that have shaped our understanding of this virus.
Okay.
And its impact on the world.
I'm ready.
All right.
Okay, so take me back to the beginning.
All right.
Where did it all start?
Well, the origins of HIV can be traced back to Africa,
Okay.
where it's believed to have crossed over from chimpanzees to humans
Oh, wow.
sometime in the early 20th century.
So it was around for a while.
Yeah, it remained largely undetected for decades.
That's incredible. So HIV was circulating in the human population before we even knew what it was.
It was.
Wow, that makes you wonder how many other viruses are out there that we haven't discovered yet.
That's a sobering thought, isn't it?
It is.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of human and animal health.
Yeah.
And the importance of ongoing surveillance efforts.
Right.
But going back to HIV, it wasn't until the early 1980s that doctors started noticing something unusual happening, primarily in the United States.
Okay, what tipped them off?
Was there a particular case
Yeah.
or cluster of cases that raised the alarm?
Right.
Well, there were actually a few key events that happened around the same time
Okay.
that pointed to something new and concerning.
Okay.
In June of 1981, a report was published describing 5 young gay men in Los Angeles
Okay.
who had developed a rare and severe type of pneumonia called pneumocystis carinii pneumonia,
Wow.
or PCP.
PCP, okay.
This type of pneumonia was typically only seen in people with severely weakened immune systems.
So these cases were unusual because these men were otherwise young and healthy?
Exactly.
Okay.
It was a red flag that something was seriously wrong with their immune systems.
Right.
And around the same time,
Yeah.
a doctor in New York City
Okay.
reported a cluster of cases of Kaposi sarcoma,
Okay.
a rare cancer, also among gay men.
Wow.
This is another unusual finding, because Kaposi sarcoma was typically only seen in much older men,
Right.
or in people with compromised immune systems.
So these must have been really puzzling and concerning cases.
They were.
Yeah.
And as more reports of similar cases started coming in from across the country, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention,
The CDC?
or CDC, realized they were dealing with a new and unknown infectious agent.
Wow. So these seemingly isolated cases were actually the first clues in a much larger puzzle.
They were.
When did scientists finally identify HIV as the culprit?
Well, it took a few years of intensive research.
Okay.
But in 1983,
Okay.
scientists in France and the United States independently isolated the virus that causes AIDS.
Wow.
It was initially given different names,
Right.
but eventually became known as HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus.
So that must have been a major breakthrough.
It was.
But also, I imagine, a very frightening time for people who were infected or at risk.
Absolutely.
Was there a lot of fear and uncertainty surrounding HIV in those early years?
A lot.
Yeah.
There was a great deal of fear and stigma associated with HIV
Right.
because so little was known about it.
Right.
People didn't know how it was transmitted.
Right.
There was no effective treatment, and the disease often progressed rapidly,
Yeah.
leading to death.
It's heartbreaking to think about what those early years of the epidemic must have been like.
It is.
But I'm curious, with all the unknowns,
Yeah.
were there any misconceptions or myths about HIV transmission back then
Oh, yeah.
that might surprise us now?
There were many.
Really?
And unfortunately, some of those myths persist even today.
Wow.
But even in those early days, the CDC was very clear that HIV could not be spread through casual contact,
Okay.
like hugging, shaking hands, sharing utensils, or using the same toilet.
Okay.
They identified the main routes of transmission as sexual contact, exposure to infected blood,
Okay.
and mother-to-child transmission during pregnancy, childbirth, or breastfeeding.
Wow. It's amazing how much misinformation and fear can spread. When something new and frightening emerges,
Right.
it highlights the importance of clear and accurate communication
Yes.
from trusted sources,
Right.
especially during public health crises.
You're absolutely right. Accurate information is crucial for dispelling myths and promoting evidence-based prevention strategies. But even with that knowledge,
Yeah.
the 1980s and 1990s were incredibly challenging times for people with HIV and AIDS.
Right.
The lack of effective treatment meant that a diagnosis was often seen as a death sentence.
Yeah. The lecture mentions that AIDS actually became the leading cause of death for people aged 25 to 44 in the United States in 1994.
Wow.
That's a stark reminder of how devastating this epidemic was.
It was a truly dark period.
Yeah.
But then came a turning point in the fight against HIV.
Okay.
In 1996, a new type of treatment called highly active antiretroviral therapy, or HAART, was introduced.
HAART. That name rings a bell.
Does it?
Was this the game changer that revolutionized HIV treatment?
It was. This combination therapy, using a cocktail of different antiretroviral drugs, dramatically changed the course of the HIV epidemic.
Wow.
For the first time, people with HIV had a real chance at living longer, healthier lives.
That must have been an incredible moment of hope for so many people.
It was.
Yeah.
Who had been living with this virus and facing a very uncertain future.
Yeah. It's amazing how far we've come in terms of HIV treatment.
It really is.
Yeah.
While HIV is still a serious chronic illness,
Right.
advances in treatment and prevention have made a world of difference.
Right.
But the global impact of HIV is still significant.
Yeah.
In 2020, an estimated 37.7 million people were living with HIV worldwide,
Okay.
and about 1.5 million people were newly infected.
Those are staggering numbers.
They are.
It's a reminder that even though we've made incredible progress,
Right.
HIV is still a major global health challenge.
It is.
What about the situation in Canada and specifically in Saskatchewan? You mentioned earlier that Saskatchewan has the highest rates of HIV in the country.
That's right.
Yeah.
Canada has made significant progress in combating HIV,
Okay.
but the epidemic is far from over.
Right.
And as you pointed out, Saskatchewan's high rates are particularly concerning. In 2015, the province saw a 43% annual increase in new HIV infections.
A 43% increase in a single year.
In a single year.
That's alarming.
It is.
What factors are contributing to these disproportionately high rates in Saskatchewan?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
With no easy answers.
Right.
It's not just about individual behaviors.
Okay.
It's about systemic issues.
Okay.
Social determinants of health.
Okay.
And historical inequities
Right.
that have created conditions of vulnerability for certain populations.
So we're talking about factors like poverty, inadequate housing, limited access to health care.
All of that.
And systemic racism.
Yeah.
I've heard those terms before in relation to health disparities.
Yeah.
But can you connect the dots for me in this specific case?
Absolutely. The lecture points out that 79% of new HIV cases in Saskatchewan in 2015 occurred in Indigenous communities.
Wow.
This stark disparity reflects the deep-rooted inequalities that Indigenous people face,
Right.
including the legacy of colonialism, residential schools, and ongoing discrimination.
Yeah.
These factors create a perfect storm of vulnerability to HIV.
So it's not just about individual choices. It's about the historical and social context
It is.
that shapes those choices and limits access to resources and opportunities.
You got it.
It makes you realize that addressing HIV effectively
Yeah,
requires a multifaceted approach
it does.
that goes beyond just promoting individual behavior change.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's about addressing those root causes of vulnerability.
Right.
It's about ensuring equitable access to healthcare, education, and social support.
Right.
It's about dismantling systemic racism and promoting reconciliation.
Yeah, it sounds like a massive undertaking,
It is.
but it's clearly essential. If we want to make real progress in addressing HIV in Saskatchewan and across Canada.
You're absolutely right. It requires a collective effort from governments, healthcare providers, communities, and individuals.
Right.
But before we get too deep into the broader societal issues,
Okay.
I think it's important to circle back to some fundamental knowledge about HIV transmission.
Okay.
There's still a lot of misinformation out there.
Right.
And I think it's crucial for everyone to have a clear understanding of how HIV is and is not spread.
Let's debunk some myths
Let's do it.
and clarify the facts.
Yes.
It's amazing how much misinformation can persist,
I know, right?
even in today's age of information overload.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the lecture outlines 5 essential conditions
Okay.
that must be met for HIV transmission to occur.
5 conditions. Okay.
If even one of these conditions is missing, transmission cannot happen.
Okay. I'm ready. Break them down for me.
All right. So the first condition is that there must be a source of infection, meaning someone who is living with HIV and has a detectable viral load.
That makes sense. No virus, no transmission.
Right.
What about the second condition?
The second condition is a means of transmission.
Okay.
HIV doesn't just float through the air.
Right.
It needs a specific way to travel from one person to another.
Okay.
The primary modes of transmission are through sexual contact, exposure to infected blood,
Okay.
and perinatal transmission from mother to baby
Right.
during pregnancy, childbirth, or breastfeeding.
Okay, so we're talking about direct contact with bodily fluids.
Right.
What about the third condition?
The third condition is that there must be a susceptible host.
Okay.
Not everyone who's exposed to HIV will become infected.
Right.
Factors like the strength of the immune system
Okay.
and the presence of other infections can influence susceptibility.
So even if there's exposure, the body might be able to fight off the virus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's not always a 100% chance of transmission,
Okay.
even if exposure occurs.
That's good to know. It highlights the complexity of HIV transmission.
It does.
What about the fourth condition?
The fourth condition is that there needs to be an appropriate route of entry into the host's body.
Okay.
HIV can enter through mucous membranes
Okay.
in the genitals, rectum, or mouth,
Right.
or through breaks in the skin.
So it needs a way to get past those protective barriers that our bodies have in place.
Exactly.
Right.
The fifth condition is that there must be a sufficient amount of virus present,
Okay.
what we call viral load,
Right.
to establish infection.
Right.
If the amount of virus is very low, the chances of transmission are greatly reduced.
So even if all the other conditions are met,
Yes,
a low viral load might not be enough to actually cause infection.
that's right.
Okay.
The viral load is a crucial factor in determining the likelihood of transmission.
Right.
And this is actually where we see the remarkable impact of antiretroviral therapy, or ART-T.
Okay.
When ART is successful in suppressing the viral load to undetectable levels. It not only benefits the individual's health,
Right.
but also makes HIV transmission essentially impossible.
Wait, so someone with HIV who is on effective treatment and has an undetectable viral load
Yes,
cannot transmit the virus to others.
that's right.
That's huge.
It is.
Wow.
And that's the power of you.
You.
Undetectable equals untransmittable.
Okay.
It's backed by a mountain of scientific evidence.
Right.
And it's one of the most important messages in the fight against HIV.
You. It has a nice ring to it.
It does.
And it's incredibly empowering for people living with HIV.
It is.
It reframes the conversation.
It does.
And challenges the stigma that often surrounds this virus.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to dispel some of the common myths about HIV transmission.
Okay, let's do it. What are some of the most persistent myths that you encounter?
One of the biggest ones is that HIV can be spread through casual contact.
Oh.
Like hugging, shaking hands, sharing utensils, or using the same toilet. Yeah. This is completely false. HIV cannot survive outside the body for very long.
Okay.
And it cannot be transmitted through saliva, tears, or sweat.
Wow, it's amazing how these myths persist.
It is.
Even when there's clear scientific evidence to the contrary.
No.
I guess fear and stigma can be powerful forces.
They absolutely are. And unfortunately, that stigma can prevent people from getting tested.
Right.
Seeking treatment or disclosing their status.
Yeah.
Which ultimately hinders our efforts to prevent new infections.
So it's not just about understanding the science of HIV transmission.
No.
It's about addressing the social and emotional barriers
Exactly.
that prevent people from taking action.
You got it. It's about creating a culture of compassion, understanding, and support.
Right.
So that people feel empowered to get the information and care they need.
Right. And speaking of care, I think it's important to acknowledge the crucial role that nurses play in all of this.
Yes, absolutely.
We've talked a lot about the science and the social aspects of HIV, but we haven't really delved into the healthcare side of things.
Right.
How are nurses involved in HIV prevention, care, and treatment?
It's a big role.
I'm really curious to learn more about their role on the front lines.
Yeah, nurses are often the unsung heroes in healthcare.
Absolutely.
I imagine they play a vital role in supporting people living with HIV.
Yeah.
Both physically and emotionally.
For sure. Nurses are often on the front lines of HIV care, providing a wide range of services in various settings: hospitals, clinics, community health centers, even people's homes.
Wow.
Their role is multifaceted and truly essential.
Okay, so walk me through what that looks like.
All right.
What are some of the specific ways that nurses are involved in HIV prevention, care, and treatment?
Well, it starts with education.
Okay.
Nurses are crucial for raising awareness about HIV, how it's transmitted, and how to reduce the risk of infection.
Okay.
This might involve having open and honest conversations about safer sex practices.
Right.
Encouraging condom use.
Or providing information about pre-exposure prophylaxis or pre-P.
Pre-PP, that's the medication that can help prevent HIV infection, right?
That's right.
It's become much more widely known in recent years.
Yes. Pre-EP is a daily medication that can significantly reduce the risk of HIV infection
Okay.
for people who are at higher risk.
Gotcha.
Nurses play a key role in educating people about pre-EP,
Okay.
helping them understand if it's right for them,
Right.
and navigating the process of accessing it.
So they're really taking a proactive approach to prevention.
Yes.
What about testing?
Yeah.
Where do nurses fit into that piece of the puzzle?
Encouraging and facilitating HIV testing is another crucial aspect of the nurse's role.
Okay.
The earlier HIV is detected,
Yeah.
the sooner treatment can begin, which leads to better health outcomes for the individual
Right.
and helps prevent further transmission.
It makes you realize how much power there is in knowledge.
It does.
Knowing your status is the first step to taking control of your health, whether that means taking steps to prevent infection or accessing treatment if you're positive.
You got it.
Right.
Nurses are also instrumental in providing ongoing care and support for people who are diagnosed with HIV.
Okay, what does that support look like?
It can take many forms.
Okay.
Nurses help people living with HIV navigate the often complex healthcare system, understand their treatment options,
Okay.
manage side effects of medications,
Right.
and cope with the emotional and social challenges
Yeah.
that can come with a chronic illness like this.
It's a holistic approach to care, isn't it?
It is.
It's not just about addressing the physical symptoms, but also recognizing the emotional and psychological impact
Right.
that HIV can have on a person's life.
Absolutely. Nurses are often a source of information, support, and advocacy for their patients. They help people living with HIV feel empowered
Right.
to manage their condition
Yeah.
and live full and meaningful lives.
The lecture also talks about the pervasive stigma surrounding HIV.
Yes.
How do nurses help address that?
Addressing stigma is a crucial part of their role.
Right.
They work to create a safe and non-judgmental environment for their patients, providing accurate information about HIV,
Okay.
correcting misconceptions, and challenging discriminatory attitudes.
I imagine those conversations can be difficult,
They can be.
but they're so important for breaking down those barriers
Absolutely.
that prevent people from getting tested,
Yep.
disclosing their status,
Yeah.
accessing care.
You're right.
Yeah.
Nurses are often at the forefront of those conversations,
Right.
advocating for their patients and promoting a more compassionate and understanding society.
Wow. It sounds like nurses are truly on the front lines
They are.
of the HIV epidemic, playing a multifaceted role.
Absolutely.
That encompasses prevention, care, advocacy, and so much more.
So much more.
It's incredibly inspiring to hear about the impact they're making.
It is. They're unsung heroes, making a real difference in the lives of people living with HIV and working towards a future where this virus no longer holds the power to define anyone's life.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the intricacies of the immune system
Right.
to the complexities of HIV
Yeah.
and the remarkable resilience of the human spirit.
It is remarkable.
I always feel like I learned so much from these deep dives.
Me too.
As we wrap up, what are some key takeaways you hope listeners will walk away with today?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that knowledge is power.
Okay.
Understanding how your immune system works,
Right.
how HIV is transmitted, and the transformative impact of treatment can truly empower you to take control of your health and protect yourself and others.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the importance of addressing stigma.
Yes.
HIV is not a moral judgment.
It's not.
It's a virus.
That's right.
By fostering compassion and understanding, we can create a more supportive environment for people living with HIV and work towards a future where this virus no longer carries the weight of shame and discrimination.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And remember, there's always more to learn.
Right.
Stay curious, stay informed,
Yeah.
and keep those conversations going. Knowledge is the best defense against fear and misinformation.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, thanks for joining us on this deep dive
Absolutely.
into the fascinating world of the immune system and HIV.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful and empowering.
Yes.
Until next time,
Yeah.
stay curious and stay well.
Stay well.